studies come out and people just gloss over them, or they just read some mainstream article about them and they don't really get into the nitty-gritty of why they apply to us as ketogenic dieters so much. So this is a really good one if you know anybody in your life who's dealing with Alzheimer's disease or showing some early signs of Alzheimer's disease. This is going to be such an important research paper for you to tell them about. So let's get into the abstract. And those of you that are new to science terms, the abstract is where they basically do the Cliff's Notes version of the entire study, and then they get into the study itself. So let's see the abstract. Background. Brain energy metabolism is impaired with Alzheimer's disease, which may be mitigated by a ketogenic diet. We conducted a randomized crossover trial to determine whether over a 12-week modified ketogenic diet period, if it would improve cognition, daily function, or quality of life in a hospital clinic of Alzheimer's disease patients. So all of these patients had Alzheimer's disease and they wanted to see, hey, can we make it any better? And see, here's the thing about Alzheimer's disease. Most of the time they put them on drugs, and the drugs have such major side effects that it can be difficult that even if they did show improvements from the drug therapy, the side effects of the drug make it where they're still kind of zombies. And so this is why you see a lot of Alzheimer's patients just kind of staring off into Never Never Land until they feed them a modified ketogenic diet, as we're going to find out in this study. So the methods for this study, they randomly assigned patients with clinically confirmed diagnosis of Alzheimer's to a modified ketogenic diet or their usual diet supplemented with low-fat, healthy eating, I'm gonna put quotation marks, healthy eating guidelines, basically based on the dietary guidelines for Americans. They enrolled them in a single phase, assessor blinded, meaning the people doing all the assessments and the numbers, they had no idea which wing they were on. 2-period crossover trials. So again, the 2-period, they put them on either the modified ketogenic diet and then a washout period, and then they put them on the low-fat, healthy eating diet with the usual diet that they would have for Alzheimer's disease. So they did that, 2 12-week treatment periods, and they did a 10-week washout period in between, just to make sure there were still no lingering effects from the previous modality. Primary outcomes were within individual changes in what's called the Addenbrooke's cognitive examination. So I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I know they have them draw like a circle, and they have to do different little drawings, and they have to mimic that, and it's an indicator of how well their brain is functioning. I remember Dr. Mary Newport, who's done a lot of her own personal research on ketogenic diets and Alzheimer's. Her husband, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but I remember many years ago when I interviewed her, her husband had early onset Alzheimer's disease, and she started feeding him MCT oil, and then more into a ketogenic diet after that. And she saw that particular test, that drawing test, the Addenbrooke's cognitive examination, get better. So you could see where he struggled with the circle and all the things they had to draw. And then after having the MCT and getting his brain firing on ketones, saw marked improvement. They also do this thing called the AD Cooperative Study Activities of Daily Living Inventory, as well as Quality of Life in Alzheimer's Disease Questionnaire. So they did that over a 12-week period. Secondary outcomes in this study considered changes in their cardiovascular risk markers, things like triglyceride to HDL ratio, small dense LDL. We're going to get into what the things were here in a minute. So what were the results? So they had a total of 26 people in the study. They randomized them. 21 of them, which was 81% of the original number, completed the ketogenic diet. Only one withdrawal was attributed because of the ketogenic diet. While on the keto diet, patients achieved sustained physiological ketosis. 12-week average beta-hydroxybutyrate levels were well within the nutritional ketosis range. Compared with the usual diet, patients on the ketogenic diet increased their mean within individual ADCS-ADL, That's all those tests I was just telling you about above. So all of them increase their and improve their average on those tests. The only one that didn't increase significantly was the ACE-3 test, which was the Addenbrooke's cognitive test. That was the only one that did not increase significantly. It did increase, but not as big as the other ones did. Changes in cardiovascular risk markers were mostly favorable, and any adverse effects were mild. So they probably are interpreting LDL cholesterol going up as an adverse effect, but we know that's not accurate. So what were the conclusions in this study? This was the very first randomized trial to investigate the impact of a ketogenic diet in patients who had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. High rates of retention, remember it was 81% of the people finished it. Adherence, that means they did the diet. And safety, meaning the diet did not cause any harm to them, appear to be achievable applying a 12-week modified ketogenic diet to the Alzheimer's disease patients. Compared with their usual diet, supplemented with low-fat healthy eating guidelines, patients on the ketogenic diet improved their daily function and their quality of life, two of the greatest importance of factors for people with dementia and Alzheimer's. So that's pretty cool, huh? That's the diet in a nutshell, the study in a nutshell, talking about the diet impacting Alzheimer's disease. And if you just joined us, welcome to Jimmy Makes Science Simple. This is my brand new show that I just started, talking about studies and trying to simplify the language so you can get the biggest points out of these studies. There's so many great research papers coming out, and they don't come out real fast, so I'm not gonna do the show every single day, but if there is a big study like this one here today, I will always bring it to you and then try to simplify the language for you. Again, this one was published in the February 23rd, 2021 issue of the journal Alzheimer's Research and Therapy. And the title of the study, Randomized Crossover Trial of a Modified Ketogenic Diet in Alzheimer's Disease. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of this study. Introduction. Despite extensive efforts towards prevention and remediation, dementia remains an urgent public health priority, affecting over 50 million people worldwide. The majority of people with dementia have Alzheimer's disease, a disorder that characteristically results in a progressive cognitive and functional decline. Supportive care remains the mainstay of treatment, and brand new strategies are sorely needed. So brain energy metabolism is impaired when it comes to Alzheimer's disease. This is why nutritional ketosis is so effective, because it's an alternative fuel source that when you have that type 3 diabetes kick in and glucose is going wild in the brain, you need a different energy substrate to feed the brain. And this is why it has been hypothesized that it would be helpful for people. And they're looking at a lot of the research on epilepsy, Parkinson's. There's a lot of really strong research out there looking at a ketogenic diet for neurodegenerative types of diseases. So compared with healthy controls, people with Alzheimer's disease display lower levels of brain insulin signaling and fewer brain insulin receptors, culminating in insulin resistance of the brain. So thus there's the type 3 diabetes we were talking about. PET scan studies demonstrate that there is a 20 to 25% deficiency in cerebral glucose metabolism. Alzheimer's disease neurons also exhibit diminished numbers of mitochondria, many of which show reduced citric acid cycle and respiratory chain activity, culminating in a decreased energy production. So ketogenic diets can theoretically mitigate any impaired brain energy metabolism for those people with Alzheimer's disease, leading to improved cognition, daily function, and quality of life. Ketogenic diets are defined as high-fat, low-carbohydrate diets that shift the body towards a fat metabolism. Neurons, listen to this, you guys. Neurons cannot metabolize fats directly, but the liver can convert the fats into ketone bodies, which serve as a major neuron energy source. Are you seeing why it's so helpful? It's okay to know that, okay, eating keto is going to produce improvements, But the why is because the body has a very sophisticated way to convert the fat through the liver into ketones, which then become the major energy source for the brain. During a typical Western diet, the concentration of the primary blood ketone, called beta-hydroxybutyrate, will supply less than 5% of the brain's energy, and its blood concentration rarely goes to that nutritional ketosis minimum of 0.5 millimole. By contrast, though, a ketogenic diet induces a physiological ketosis in which beta-hydroxybutyrate provides a great contribution to brain energy, and the blood concentration easily exceeds the 0.5 millimole. Compared with glucose, ketones produce more energy per unit oxygen. Cerebral ketone metabolism remains normal in Alzheimer's disease. This is the coolest part. If somebody has mild onset of Alzheimer's symptoms and they're already kind of coming in and out of the disease state and consciousness and being able to understand what's going on, you feed them a ketogenic diet, they come back alive again. If you ever saw the Robin Williams movie, what was that movie called? Awakenings, where they had the patients come alive. It's kind of like that with Alzheimer's disease when people go on a ketogenic diet. So what that does is it potentially compensates for the brain insulin resistance and deficient glucose metabolism. And that makes sense too, that if it's insulin resistance of the brain, if it's diabetes of the brain, type 3 diabetes, it makes sense. Just like keto helps with type 2 diabetes, and even for type 1, it helps to control the amount of insulin that type 1 has to use. It stands to reason that that same metabolic pathway is going to help the brain health of someone with type 3 diabetes. Ketogenic diets also typically upregulate mitochondria biogenesis and induce expression of genes associated with the citric acid cycle and respiratory chain, thus increasing the neuron energy production. So to date, all they've had is 2 clinical trials that have examined the symptomatic effects of using a ketogenic diet for Alzheimer's patients. A single arm study examined the impact of a 12-week keto diet on 15 patients. The 11 people who completed that study improved their cognitive scores, but the lack of any control group meant additional contributing factors could not be ruled out. A second ongoing randomized control trial, so it's still being conducted, it's not yet published, has provided preliminary data on the impact of a 12-week modified Atkins diet versus a recommended diet in 14 patients who exhibit mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease. The most adherent patients saw improvements in their memory scores, but overall adherence was only okay and function did not improve. So far, that's it. Before this study here that I'm reading to you now, that's it. And one of them is not even published yet, and it's even showing lackadaisical kind of results. So this study here is truly landmark.